Court. South Africa has decided to withdraw from the ICC following a dispute last year over a visit by Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who is wanted by the tribunal for alleged war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide. No country has ever withdrawn from the ICC, which was established to prosecute cases of genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity. Well, for more on these latest developments, we are joined in studio by Mr. Allan Ngari, researcher at the Transnational Threats and International Criminal Division at the Institute of Security Studies. Good afternoon, Allan, and thank you so much for joining us this Friday afternoon on the news desk.
Thank you, Kirshni. It's a pleasure to be here.
Look, the DA now on its way to the High Court, guns blazing, alleging that the minister acted unilaterally without gaining parliamentary approval. Do they have a point?
Let me start first by saying that this decision by the South African government is really a regression in the fight against impunity for international crimes. And specifically to your question, the Constitution is very clear in its section 231 that the executive does indeed have the prerogative to negotiate treaties, international treaties for that matter, but it requires the National Council of Provinces and the National Parliament's sanction, approval, in order for ratification to happen. So while there isn't a reverse process that is prescribed by law, it is assumed that any state, and in this case South Africa, that wishes to withdraw from any international treaty must then follow the same process in reverse. So in this case, it is important that the South African government consult with Parliament, that Parliament made the decision to withdraw from the Rome Statute before the notification was done by the executive.
Why do you view this as such a serious regression, Allan? Because it does look, when you look at the ICC case docket, it does look like a purely African one, and it lends credence to this constant criticism that the court is biased and targeting African leaders. And if we look at the numbers, all 8 of the court's active investigations and all 18 cases are against Africans. So that's a huge number.
Those numbers that you say are true, but I think it's important to clarify some misperceptions around the entire process of taking cases to the International Criminal Court. There are 3 processes. A state party can take a situation or refer itself to the International Criminal Court. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court can institute an investigation, and finally the Security Council of the UN can do so. The UN Security Council has only referred 2 situations, one referring to Darfur and the second one to Libya. The Office of the Prosecutor has only initiated 1 investigation, and that's in the Kenyan situation. In the remainder of the cases, which is the bulk of them, it is state parties to the Rome Statute, African states, that have referred the matter to the ICC. So it isn't fair or right to say that the ICC is targeting African states. In fact, a majority of the cases have been referred to the court by African states themselves.
Burundi and South Africa setting a brave precedent here. How likely is this to trigger further African withdrawals? What do you make of it?
I think we have to turn back to the decision of the African Union summit this January, where the president of Kenya indicated that if the International Criminal Court does not adhere to the concerns of African states and the African Union, then there will be no other result other than the withdrawal en masse of African states. States parties to the Rome Statute, that is. And we are seeing now that Burundi and South Africa have made steps towards this withdrawal. So it doesn't come as a surprise that this withdrawal is happening. I think the point at the end of the day is that have avenues been exhausted to ensure that the concerns of African states have been addressed? And respectfully, no, it hasn't.
You've just preempted my next question. Can you just quickly elaborate on the impact of these kind of withdrawals for international criminal justice, and more specifically for the victims of grave crimes in Africa right now?
Thanks. I think that's really the crux of the issue, and we must focus ourselves on the victims of international crime. That's where we should focus our debates. While there's a lot of geopolitical concerns among African states, Western states, the African Union, the ICC, at the end of the day, it is the victims of international justice that we need to pay attention to. Now, what happens at this particular instance with withdrawal of African states from the Rome Statute is that we then create an impunity gap where international crimes will not be dealt with effectively in Africa as a whole. African states, very few of them have the capacity to investigate, prosecute, and try international crimes. If we take out the ICC from the picture, then we do not have a mechanism to resort to for justice for the victims of international crimes. That's a debate that I think we need to really centralize in these discussions about withdrawal by African states.
Wonderful, Allan. I do wish we had more time. It's a conversation for another day. We can go on and on. Allan Ngari from the Institute of Security Studies, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us on the SABC News Desk. Let's move